So we're going to move on to our final speaker, creator of the evening. We're going to shake things up a little bit differently. So we're going to have a little Q&A session. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Megan, or AKA Petite Gloom. She's an illustrator. I'll get her to introduce herself to you. But I'm going to ask her some questions, and then if we do have enough time, I will open up the floor if anybody does have any questions for her. And if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, please. All right, Megan, are you ready?
Yep, I am.
Fantastic, here we go. All right, just popping my speaker view so it's me and you. Megan, do you mind introducing yourself to us quickly?
Yep. So my name is Megan, and I normally go by my first name and my middle name online, so Megan Rhiannon. I am an autistic freelance illustrator living in London. And like a lot of autistic young adults, I think, I received my diagnosis really late. Sam and Chloe's stories, and even Rose's, but all resonated with me. I think it's shocking that the running theme throughout is how much of a terrible time we all had in the school system.
I know, right?
It's relieving and upsetting in equal parts to hear. There's like a feeling of sort of solidarity, I guess, or camaraderie to it, but it's also just ridiculous and kind of devastating. Like it's not a good thing. And similar to Rose and Chloe, I spent a lot of time in the library, and also skiving. And then
Yes.
Similar to Sam, when I got to college, I spent 90% of my time in the dark room. So shout out to dark rooms, because that was a fun one to connect with. I didn't receive my diagnosis of autism, and I had no idea I was autistic until I was 18 and I was in my first year of university. Similar to Chloe, I spent a lot of my childhood and my adolescence and my teenage years in hospital. I was under neurology wards at Great Ormond Street. I had every brain scan and prod and poke going, and they just had no idea what was wrong with me. They looked at mental health for a while too, but I didn't fit anything cookie cutter enough for them to diagnose me properly. And the same with the neurology stuff. I didn't fit anything well enough. So eventually I received a diagnosis that I realized was actually just like a fancy medical term of labeling my symptoms. So they said that I had something like sporadic hemiplegic migraines, which literally when I got older, I realized they'd like fobbed me off, because all it means is that I had random half paralyzing headaches kind of thing. Like that's all it means in layman's terms. It wasn't actually the diagnosis that I thought it was when I was young. It was just fancy words. Which is fair, because they didn't know what was wrong with me and they just wanted to help in some way. So I don't want to bash them too much, but I realized I was autistic completely by accident. I'd been struggling with so much for so long, and then I was reading online and I came across an article that was a woman's account of late diagnosis. And I read it thinking that some of the sensory stuff would resonate with me as what I thought was a lifelong migraine sufferer. And I read the article and then I was like, oh no, like there's a lot more to this than I thought there was. And all the dots connected up. So obviously throughout my life, my only symptom or trait was not just headaches, it was the inability to connect with my peers, and it was the constant overwhelm, and it was the needing the routine and people not understanding or respecting that, and then just losing my mind and not knowing why, and all those kinds of things, the obvious things. And I'm 24 now, and I am just living autistic, I guess. I've never really been particularly good at trying to fit myself to normal life. I've tried 9 to 5s and I can't handle it. I lose it after I go like 2 months strong and then I can't handle it. So I stopped. I ended up being an illustrator. It's not really a fun, inspiring story. It's literally just that when I was in high school, I received so little support, and all of my teachers and my peers and my family were so at a loss of what to do with me, that I basically almost flunked out of high school. I only took a couple of GCSEs in the end. I think I only came out of high school with like 2.5 or 3 GCSEs, one of them being in philosophy, which is a bit useless because I had nothing else to back that up to be able to pursue it. I don't have a maths GCSE at 24, so I could never work in a supermarket. Don't have science either. I just have some really hodgepodge ones. I managed just about to scrape a C in art, which I then went to college with. And then I managed to scrape my way through college as well, because I also was still not well then, obviously still undiagnosed, still unknowing. And then I made a really, really good impression somehow for the first time in my life at my university interview. And so they let me in and did not look at my GCSEs. And that's how I got to where I am today.
That's incredible. There's so much of that just story that you could even just pause and just carry on talking about. I just want to echo like what you said about how throughout all of our stories, how we've just been failed by education and adults and mental health institutions and the institutions that are supposed to help us. Thank you so much for giving us a background story as to who you are and what you are. One of the things I really wanted to ask you about is your zine, or actually a book, if we're really honest. I remember, so how many pages is it again? It's something ridiculous.
I have it somewhere near me. I don't know where.
It's like
I think it's
165 or something.
Almost total. Yeah, I think it's between like 160 and 169 or something. I know it's below 170.
Hey. But so it's, I mean, it started out as a zine. And now it's 100% a book. It's
a book, yeah.
Yeah, it's 100% a book now. We'll pop, obviously, so if you go onto Megan's Instagram right now, you can see basically what we are talking about. And you can also look on her website. Buy everything in her store, please. Same with Sam. Buy everything that they make and do, because these people are absolutely incredible. So talking about this book, what was Stimming Autistic? What was your motivation for creating it in the first place?
So when I got diagnosed, I'm not sure which way around to talk about it. My two motivations basically were the feelings I had in my childhood and my adolescence, and then also the void I was faced with once I got my diagnosis. So growing up undiagnosed as a child, I skimmed over it just because I know it's going to be a late talk, so I'm trying to shorten my story. But
no, don't shorten it. We're here for everything.
The depth of the uncertainty and I guess the pain, if you want to be dramatic about it or honest, that I felt throughout my childhood and my adolescence was extreme. To grow up autistic and not knowing was really hard and really scary and really upsetting. Like I had no idea what was wrong with me, but I knew that something was fundamentally like wrong on so many levels that I didn't have the words or the descriptors to express. And so it was all internalized, and my peers and my family and my teachers and stuff, basically everyone could tell there was something wrong and no one knew how to describe it. So it wasn't just that I didn't fit in with my peers, but I didn't even have the level where I could really fit in with adults or anything either. It was just like almost complete isolation. And then trying to grapple internally with the idea of like something's wrong with me, but I don't know what, at the same age that you're meant to be discovering yourself and forming your identity and discovering the things that you like and don't like and making friends and meeting people, and like none of it happened. I had such a hard time just existing in my own body and with my own self that everything else was double a mess. So it was really difficult. So part of the reason that I made Existing Autistic was to hopefully help, like even if it's just one person. I never know how much reach something will have, but my thought was that if I can help even just one family, if one mother or father or parent buys this book and reads it and gives it to their child, or uses some of the information to help their child or their niece or their nephew or just their neighbor or something, then I would be really happy. Or even better, if someone who was grappling with some of the things that I did read it, then that would also be amazing. And then the other reason I wrote it was because after I got my diagnosis at 18, I was buzzing, honestly. I was so immensely relieved to finally have answers that I thought I went home the same day from my assessment and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to read everything now. I'm going to read everything I can get my hands on, and I'm going to learn all about myself, and I'm going to look after myself properly, or learn to, for the first time in my whole life. I came home from my assessment knowing that I wasn't broken, I was just different, and there had to be information about this. And I think the situation has been improved a lot in the last few years, but when I was 18 in 2016, the information was not there in the same way, not that I could find. I did a lot of Googling, and I went to libraries and I tried to look for books online and stuff, and it was all potholes of books and information about young children and their parents, and how to fix children, and support groups for parents, and information for parents, and how to force your child to eat the food they don't want to eat, and all that kind of stuff. And there was not a lot of accounts of autism in adolescents or young adults or even just adults. And the only real places that I could find any kind of information or support or advice from people in a similar age group to me, or even just within like the next 10 years, was social media. So I found the most support and the most information from.
Oh, we've lost Megan. That's okay. I'm sure she'll be back in a moment. Or hang tight. Hey, Owl, how about you put some tunes on in the meantime?
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back.
Sorry,
Yes.
I think I accidentally hung up with my earphones. I think I tapped some sort of secret button on my earphones. I'm so sorry.
Isn't technology just great? No, don't
Mad.
worry about it.
So
You're
essentially
okay,
I found, so basically what I was saying is I found the most support on Twitter, in the autistic community on Twitter. And then I found more of my own age group on Tumblr, back in the golden days of Tumblr before it got a bit
shout
weird.
out to Tumblr.
Honestly. And then I found I found some stuff on Pinterest. Most of it was like activities for parents to do with their kids, but I worked out that I could take some of those resources and sort of try and flip them and fit them to myself. That was where I learned the most about stimming and stuff, was actually Pinterest. And so I wanted to make this book for a long time, not originally really to have an impact, but for myself, for the catharsis of it. But I didn't feel ready, and I had nowhere near enough information because I couldn't find the information. And so it kind of took a back shelf, and I didn't really think about it much. At one point, I think maybe some people, if anyone who follows me is watching, they might remember that in like 2017 or something, I made like the smallest A6 pamphlet about being autistic.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, it's like the baby of what became, like that one thing. Oh no, that one warp, so that existing autistic could run, I think is the thing.
Love it.
And then I forgot about it for a long time, really. And then I've been freelancing since I graduated. I graduated in 2018. I can't count. Anyway, I graduated university, somehow managed to pull university off, and I made a book for my final project about just like everyday things. And then through that, I discovered that I really liked making books and zines and pamphlets, and that's still what I do now. And then so last year, I think I finally sat down properly, and I'd been drawing a bit more about autism. After my initial diagnosis, I had like a year or 2 year period of suddenly feeling quite insecure about it. When I first got diagnosed, I felt very confident because I was just so elated to have my answers and to find some sort of community that I just didn't shut up about it. And then I finished university, or maybe it was in my last year of university, I suddenly started to feel quite insecure about it. Not about my diagnosis or trusting that I was autistic, but the idea of people knowing that I was autistic and what that meant. And so I didn't make a lot of art around it for a while. And then I got to a point again where I was like, well, I can't live like this. Like, I'm just repeating the cycle of my childhood, even though I have the answers now. Like, I'm just still feeling the same cycle of shame and fear, and I worry over my identity and stuff. So then I thought, well, maybe it would be good to do some drawing about autism. So I did a couple of drawings, and then I thought, you know what, I'm kind of enjoying exploring these feelings. And then I was like, maybe I'll make a zine, just like a small zine.
No, you will make a book.
Yeah, I made a book by accident. So it started off where I was just trying to make notes on like the topics I wanted to cover, and I was like, okay, I'll just do like 3 or 4 or 5 topics. And then I thought, well, if I'm gonna make some sort of document that at least tries to catalog information, and then I thought, even if I could help one person, I would want there to be as much information as possible. And that's how the zine spiraled into a 169-page book.
just because the sheer, like, there's so much information.
There's so much to know, absolutely.
So
like the spectrum is so wide.
Yeah. Exactly. Do you know what? Like, something actually stood out to me. I do have set questions, but you mentioned stimming. Have I said that correctly? Could you explain what stimming is for the uninitiated?
Yeah, so stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior, and it's basically any kind of repetitive movement or action that gives you sensory input. So autistic individuals and people with Asperger's like Chloe struggle with processing their senses. It's not something we have any control over, really. It's just a fact of the deal of, having it. Our brain often processes sensory information differently, whether that's fast or slow or both somehow at the same time, which is often how it feels. We have a lot of difficulty there. And it really varies day to day. And in each individual, you'll have varying levels of difficulties with this. But it's safe to say that I think all autistic individuals' sensory processing is affected in some capacity. So that means for us, the world is very overwhelming. Everything can be too loud or too quiet, or you might not be able to monitor the tone of your voice, or you might be really sensitive to particular types of sounds, different pitches. Same with vision, things can be too bright, or maybe you struggle with your vision. And then like tactile too, so touching things, like it's such like it's everything, all of your senses. But then there's also lesser talked about senses like proprioception, so knowing where your limbs are and stuff, being aware of where you're putting your feet. It's things like that as well. So then stimming is the act of creating your own sensory input, which often is used as a tool to try and help combat some of the negative input or the input that you're struggling with. It's a way of balancing yourself out and grounding yourself. And often I think in late diagnosed people, this has to be a skill that you have to learn. A lot of the time you spend so much time feeling shameful about your identity and not knowing about yourself that you suppress these kinds of actions that like differ you. And then I think, especially, I mean, I found it really hard as I got older to then try and relearn to be comfortable with the idea of doing that. And it's still something that I grapple with.
No, I can relate to that on the case of you know it as a child because it's just
instinctive.
who you are, it's natural. Then you get told to reject it and to unlearn it, and then as an adult you realize that's not healthy, so you have to relearn how to be yourself.
Exactly.
Incredible. Okay, I'll go on to my next question. So in this book that we're talking about, you talk about sensory overload, and obviously you've just spoken about it there. How does that play into your creative practice? And could you tell us a bit about how these kind of two come together?
So even as a child, I processed things, even though I didn't know I was autistic. I had no idea what my deal was. I very instinctively from childhood processed things through my art. Obviously at the time it was a very underdeveloped practice. It was like a baby practice. But one of my earliest memories of like art practice as a kid was making a zine about ancient Egypt, which at the time was a special interest, which anyone autistic knows it's like the biggest deal. I like really dutifully would sit and like draw things out and copy things out. And at one point I even took some like sand from like the sand pit in school and I put it in a little Ziploc bag and I stapled it to my zine and I was like, it's from Egypt. So
I hope you still have this.
I have no idea what happened to it. I don't have it. I would pay good money to see it. Like I would like to see the first scene. So from a young age and even now, a lot of and I've only really realized this, I've only really connected the dots somehow in the last couple of years when people have been asking me more questions like this, I became more introspective about it. But a lot of my art practice is to do with processing and remembering. I have really bad issues with my short term and my long term and even like my working memory. I have like debilitating memory issues. I'm not sure if it's because I'm constantly so overloaded or because I'm a chronic insomniac. But I have memory issues. So I can't keep anything in my head, like nothing sticks. That's why we're doing this as an interview, because sometimes when I try to talk from nothing, I literally like I can't remember words, like I can't talk. So my creative practice is about documenting things and processing things and like pinning down everything that I experience, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it's just like a bad sound, whether it's like a really passionate interest or whether it's learning about myself, like with my book. I had like a revelation, I think like a year ago, that my whole practice was just that. It was all autistic. It was literally just about pinning everything down and working things out and processing things like in my own time and place.
I love that so much.